Welcome to Caldwell County Today. I'm Paige Counts, Public Information Officer for Caldwell County. Joining me today are Cindy Akins and Roberta Blinson with AMOREM. Yes. I'm so proud of myself that I got the name right. It's only been how long now? 2 years?
Yes, a little over 2 years. But yes, you said it so well.
A little over 2 years, and I finally got it right. Cindy, you're the volunteer coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about volunteers and hospice, how that works.
Well, I want to say that hospice Legacy Caldwell Hospice and Palliative Care began with volunteers. So I think that's very special for people to know. But about 40 years ago, and Roberta, if that's okay if I go ahead and introduce her, she was our very first volunteer and is still with us today, actively serving. Cutting patients' hair. So we're happy about that. But volunteering with AMOREM is a wonderful experience. We have volunteers, about 250 volunteers, young volunteers. We have volunteens. We have adult volunteers that serve in 12 counties. So AMOREM does serve the 12 counties. So we are constantly recruiting for volunteers. Although we have some wonderful volunteers, we're always in need. And I'll go over a little bit later the different disciplines and roles of volunteers that we have. But it's an honor and privilege to be in this department working with all our volunteers and our staff. We have a wonderful team. We actually have a volunteer coordinator in the High Country where we serve, and then in our Burke service area, and then the Caldwell service area. So we're really excited and honored to be working with such great people.
Roberta, your first volunteer, what did you do in those early days with hospice?
Well, we started out as we worked with the nurses, and they were only a small number of us. And we started out, and we would have a patient, and we just phone called each other and told each other to be at such and such home or place that they were. Most of them then were homes because we didn't have any facilities. So we went to the home because we would not leave the family without one of us there. And we just took turns and sat on the porch or sat in the room or wherever we felt they needed us, not in their face, but we were there for them. And that was the main thing I remember now. And of course, the volunteering after that was, it was so new, and everybody wanted to guard their patient, so we were completely strangers. So it was a while before you really connect with the patient, but you connected with the family.
What are some of your other memories of serving, because you've done a variety of things?
Oh yeah, I got into more than I expected. Well, at that time, like I say, there were so few of us, and we had to do what we had to do, and we were our families would call us. We left our phone number, so we were the volunteers, and we went when the family called, as much as hospice calling. Hospice didn't have to call us, the family would call some of us. And we would administer the medicine, and I remember taking the medicine and chopping it up and putting it in an ice cube tray and freezing it because they couldn't swallow it. And we can't touch that now. And then, and of course, we would have times where other families in the family wanted to take the medicine besides the patient. So we had a lot of trouble with that till we figured that out. But that was so long ago, that doesn't happen now. I hope it doesn't happen now. But it's easy, because the medicines that they have, you have to be cautious over them.
What are you doing now for hospice, Roberta?
Right now, they put me in the role of doing haircuts. I mostly do the haircuts. It's hard to do a shampoo or whatever, but I can do a blow dry or whatever. But haircuts, and I did a beard trim.
She did.
But mostly haircuts, and sometimes I think it's more for the family for the patient to look good. Sometimes it's for the patient, and they do feel better when they can get the hair off their ears or face or whatever needs to be done.
I know I always feel better when I get my hair done. So
Yes.
I imagine for a patient, especially one who's bedridden, that's quite a treat.
Yes, it is.
It is.
Cindy, you've mentioned you serve a lot of counties now. I mean, AMOREM serves a lot of counties. So what are those counties?
Well, if I can remember them.
Okay, if you can remember.
Okay, we serve Caldwell, Catawba, Alexander and Burke, Ashe, Avery, Wilkes-Barre, Watauga, Cleveland, McDowell, Rutherford, and Lincoln.
So that's
I think I got them all.
I think you did. I think you did.
Okay. But we have grown, yes, since we have merged with Burke Hospice and Palliative Care. We certainly have grown, which means we are in greater need for volunteers. Yes.
And if you recruit a volunteer here in Caldwell County, they serve Caldwell County. Is that right? I'm just making a guess here.
Yes, that is true. However, we do have some volunteers that are willing to go to, let's say, Burke County, for example, or to Catawba, or even travel up to the high country if we need them to do that. We actually just had for example, one of our memorial services up in the high country. We had a low country Caldwell volunteer that was willing to go to that memorial service and sing for us. Right now we currently have a Caldwell volunteer that spends a great number of hours at our Burke campus. So they certainly can cross, and we encourage them to if that's what they'd like to do, so yes.
So what are the requirements to be a volunteer?
First and foremost, we want them to have a passion to serve. We want them to want to care for others and be sympathetic and be dedicated. A lot of times volunteers come through training with wonderful intentions to serve and quickly learn that they don't have the time to volunteer. But we do want volunteers who are willing and dedicated, of course. We have volunteering programs, so I'll kind of start there. Any teenager that's 9th to 12th grade can volunteer with us. And then after that, they are considered an adult volunteer. So they must come through training. We do have a 12-hour training. Usually our trainings are over the course of 2 days, non-consecutive days. And then we have lots of paperwork they have to fill out, a TB test, driver's license, background check, and those kinds of things. But once they complete all those, then we have a post-training interview with our volunteers to find out how do they want to serve. What did they learn in training that was an interest to them? And we make that connection with them. We onboard them, and then some volunteers quickly learn that they want to do more than what they thought they wanted to do. So they can serve in various roles, in multiple roles. But I did want to mention, as I was talking about training, we do have something really exciting now and new. It's online training. So for those who don't have the time or would prefer to do online training on their computer, that is an option now. And we've had that up and running for about a year, almost a year, and it has gone wonderfully. It's a very smooth process for those who don't mind sitting at their computer. Usually they can finish it within a 2-week period. So it's really a wonderful course. It's very much in line with what we would do in person. We still meet with folks afterwards to talk to them, of course, in a post-training interview, but the process is really smooth, and we're really excited about that. So that's something I wanted to share today.
And several years ago, I went through the hospice training as a hospice employee, and I remember it being very informative. I feel like I learned so much in those 2 days. So talk a little bit about the elements of training.
Okay. It really is interesting, and we love to see folks come through it because they say the same thing. You know, wow, I didn't realize that there was so much involved in hospice, not just the volunteer program, but in hospice and palliative care overall. But we do have speakers at every training from different parts of the team. For example, we do have nurses who speak about end of life and what to look for as someone is approaching their final hours. We have social workers that talk about family dynamics, and they really are key players with volunteers. The social workers and the volunteers connect for those who have patient family assignments. So we really go into a lot of discussion about communication with patients and their families. We have chaplains. Our chaplains speak, of course, on the spiritual care part of serving as a hospice volunteer. And then we have other team members who are starting to come in to talk about quality and compliance and groundskeeping. Our CEO speaks about the philosophy of hospice, the history of hospice. Bereavement speaks. So it's a very, very broad training, as you said. It's really in-depth and interesting, and we do provide lunch. If that's a question for folks, I can't sit through that long of a training all day, but we do provide lunch and some snacks and things. They get a manual, which is a really cool manual. It's very in-depth, gives lots of information. It's just a really good time for volunteers to bond to. Every training that we have, it's kind of like we form a little family, and they can connect with each other, going forward. So it's really a special time, and I would encourage anybody that's interested at all to come through training or online training to give us a call and just let us know you're interested.
Roberta, a few minutes ago, Cindy mentioned a passion for serving. What drew you to start serving with hospice? I mean, when you started, like you said, it was just a core group of volunteers and some nurses. So how did you get involved?
Well, I think not everybody gets involved because of different things that happen. And my mother passed away, and could not be there. I had a hard time with that for a couple of years. That I had to figure out that God didn't want me there before I realized that I, wanted to be there, and I was planning to come back. I lived in Florida, and I was planning to come back to be with her during her last days, but that didn't happen. And it took the training to tell me that I wasn't in charge, And then I think it was that, and I think I was sitting in Dr. Belt's office, and they had signs up, and that's one thing I think to advertise our volunteers. The sign was on their desk, pasteboard or whatever, that said, you want to be a volunteer. And that's how it started out. The advertising was in all the doctor's offices, and I guess we could put it in the beauty shops too. I mean, there's so many ways. I mean, the newspaper, but people don't always read that, But it was something that I said, I'm going to try that. I wasn't there for my mother. Maybe I can be there for someone else.
And Cindy, you can speak to this. I feel like a lot of people who volunteer with hospice have had an experience with hospice. Probably not always, but do you see that a lot?
Yes, definitely. The majority of the folks that call us that say, I had a wonderful experience with AMOREM or Burke Hospice, Legacy Caldwell, I want to give back. So yes, most definitely. Not always, as you said. Even as staff members, personally, I didn't really have an experience with hospice other than knowing who Caldwell Hospice was. But that's okay. You don't have to have an experience to want to care for others and love them and serve them the way volunteers do. But yes, a lot of our volunteers have had experiences.
And we've talked a lot about the patient care piece of hospice, but your volunteers do a lot of stuff.
They do. They really do.
I mean, patient care is a big piece. But what other things do they do?
And I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people do think, and our hospice volunteers are amazing, and they're, this is a small community here in Caldwell, and if you're a Caldwell Hospice volunteer or an AMOREM volunteer, wow, people assume that they work with our patients or they serve our patients. And you're right, that isn't always the case. We have administrative volunteers, and I say that first because We are really utilizing administrative volunteers or office volunteers. We have a great need. You know, our staff is growing, which means that workload is growing and they need help. So we have a number of volunteers that come to my office all across campuses that we have, doing things like filing, scanning, computer work, even something as simple as, you know, collating newsletters. So that's a need. We have ambassador volunteers who serve as liaisons between AMOREM and their churches. That is extremely important and a big part of what our volunteers do in the community. We have veteran volunteers who serve our veteran patients. So at admission, when our social workers and our admitting team assesses the patient, they quickly learn that this is a veteran. They talk about our services and would they like what's called a veteran honoring veteran presentation. So we have wonderful veteran volunteers who actually present that presentation to our patients. That's a beautiful part of our program. We do have chaplain volunteers. We have, like I said earlier, volunteens. We have the patient family volunteers who serve in the homes, in our long-term care facilities, and even on our patient care units. We go as far as to have volunteers who take care of our our fleet cars. They help us take them to get the oil changed. I mean, whatever it is our volunteers are willing and needed to do, we really do have a broad spectrum. We have about 20 different roles that they serve, but lots of ways. If you have a gift in singing or playing an instrument, we have a program where we have volunteers to serve at the bedside of patients who would like music played. Some of our patients want to tell their story. They want their story of their life to be recorded for their family after they pass. So we have volunteers that can record or write down stories, and that's called our legacy program. We have pet therapy volunteers who have certified pet therapy dogs who come to our patient care units and visit our patients and staff. And I'm sure I'm leaving lots out, but those are just a few. And every role is crucially and vitally important. We definitely could not serve and do what we do without volunteers.
I mean, I'm looking at a list, and it seems like if you have a talent in anything, or you may not even consider it a talent, but you are able to do fill in the blank, then hospice could use you.
Yes.
Speaking of hospice using you, you have trainings coming up.
We do. We have trainings. We have 2 trainings coming up. One's in our High Country service area, and that is going to be on July the 23rd and the 25th, and then in our Valdez service areas in Burke. So that'll be July 16th and 18th. If anybody is interested, they can give us a call. We do have about 6 trainings a year, and that's divided into our service areas. So we are trying to have our trainings now in the spring and then in the fall, just because our online training is so popular. But we will have about 2 trainings per year in each service area. So if folks can't make it in the fall, then perhaps in the spring they could come.
How do people sign up for training?
They just give us a call, 754-0101. Or they can actually email us if they want to do that. We have a wonderful website. Folks can go on and complete an application online. And that's pretty much it. They just reach out to us and let us know that they're interested, and we sign them up.
Awesome. And I'm assuming that's the same way to get the virtual training.
Yes. And that's just a really, really simple start. You know, we email you a link to start with the training, and then off you go. You know, you could maybe work on one piece of the training, one module we call it, maybe a couple for one day, and then go back the next day and work on a couple more. So again, our online is very, we want it to be convenient for our volunteers and their schedules.
And your volunteers, do they still have high school clubs? How does that work?
We still have clubs in yes, we sure do. And Crystal Birch is our volunteer coordinator here in the Caldwell area, and she oversees our volunteer program. And Crystal does go to the schools where we have high school clubs. A lot of wonderful students in our high schools that not necessarily are AMOREM volunteers. They may not have gone through the complete training and are official volunteers. but they serve as club members, which means they support our program, and they still go to facilities, for example, like our long-term care facilities, and they help host parties for the residents there. Halloween parties, Easter parties, Christmas parties, bingos. Crystal was just at a facility yesterday with the students. So that's a very, very sweet program. We have some really neat volunteers who love being a volunteer. They love the patients. They love the residents. And we're really fortunate to have, there aren't very many hospices around that have volunteering programs. So yes, if there are teens that are interested, same process, 12-hour training, very much the same paperwork. So we'd love to have a lot more volunteers. Yeah.
Roberta, if someone's interested in volunteering with AMOREM, what do you tell them?
I tell them to get with it, to get with it, because like you say, the passion has to be there, and knowing why they're doing it, and most of them is because they've had the experience of seeing a volunteer do what they do.
Mm-hmm. Cindy, have I forgotten anything?
Just a shout out and thank you to all our volunteers who currently serve. It is a commitment. We realize that before we even pick up the phone to call a volunteer about a possible assignment or a need, we're always assured that they're going to say yes, and if they don't, there's a really good reason why they can't. It's neat because being a volunteer with AMOREM, we're not hounding you, we're not pushing you to do something. We may call you several times, but it's because we love you and we know that you would serve our patients well. But I just want to thank all our volunteers, and we actually just had a volunteer appreciation banquet, and we do that every year. And this year it was the Great Gatsby theme, the Roaring Twenties. And it's our way once a year for all our staff, all our team members at AMOREM to say thank you to our volunteers, because staff get really busy, and some of them don't even get the chance to meet our volunteers in action. But some do, and they're so appreciative. But it is our way of saying thank you, and we have entertainment and food and pins that we award volunteers with, and it's great fellowship and fun. And this year we had some old cars there, and Roberta had on her boa. She was just all dressed up for the Great Gatsby theme, and we had on our flapper dresses. It was a lot of fun, and that's something we look forward to every year. But just a shout out and a thank you to all the volunteers watching. We really appreciate all that you do for us.
And I appreciate what AMOREM does for the community, and especially the volunteer program, because I have seen it at work firsthand.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you, ladies, for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
And thank you for watching Caldwell County Today.